Join me on the sofa with Esther Wednesday the 25th of January at 8 o'clock GMT in the series Men Supporting Men, the theme His Story Part 1. Gerald Alston from the Grammy Award-winning group The Manhattans, Coach Anthony Lyken, fitness coach and motivational speaker, EJ Soul Guide, spiritual therapist, will be taking a deep dive into authentically sharing their most vulnerable moments, discussing their breaking point, their pain, their overcoming and the solution. Streaming live on YouTube and Facebook at Esther Austin Global. On the sofa with Esther. Right, we've got a gentleman coming in. Today's show is a show that's going to be held at the end of every month. Men Supporting Men. Hey.
Hey, Herman.
Herman, how are you?
We call him Anthony this side of town.
Oh, we call him Anthony? Okay. Okay, Anthony.
Herman. But ladies and gents, just to introduce you to those on the panel today, this is our Men Supporting Men group. And at the end of each month, we're going to be talking about different things that affect, impact, influence, or maybe inspire men, especially Black men. And today, and at the end of the next session in February, we are going to be diving deep into his story. Each of these gentlemen are going to be talking about his story in a very deep, impactful way. And the mission of this particular platform is to shine a light on men being authentic, men coming together to supporting each other so that they can become vulnerable, because in that space of vulnerability, there is strength. And as they say, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, that's what happens when you go down, the only way is up. So I'd like to thank the gentleman joining me today on my, I'm not even going to say top right, top left, because it could be different, but we have in the hat, is that okay? We have EJ, absolutely. EJ Soul Guide, he's a spiritual therapist, and he's going to be sharing today, taking that deep dive with us. And also we have legend Gerald Alston. He's going to be deep diving with us, and it's a pleasure to have you on, Gerald. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, EJ. Yeah. And also we have Coach Anthony Lyken, motivational speaker, and he's joined us today. So each of these gentlemen are going to be deep diving. Hopefully we'll have the other gentlemen joining us throughout the evening, but today specifically, these three gentlemen will be taking that deep dive of being authentic, honest, and open about their journey as men, as Black men. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome, guys. Welcome, Gerald.
Thank you.
How's your week been, gentlemen? How's your week been?
Happy New Year to you all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, belated Happy New Year.
Belated Happy New Year. Oh my gosh, yeah.
That's because I saw you this year. Gerald, I've been telling all my friends about you, man. I've been telling all the guys about you. So I met my Shiloh idol from the Manhattans.
Wow.
That was big. They were like, oh my God, that was big.
You got to show your friends then the video and tell them what we're doing.
Tell them what we're doing.
Share this around.
They're still wearing the fig leaves, scared to have those fig leaves come off.
Yes.
But, it's going to take some time for men to really get whole and be naked and not ashamed.
And that's why this group, that's why this group is being put together to encourage, to inspire, to influence those to do that. And so, as I said, for today's session, we are going to deep dive into your lives. And there are sort of three critical questions that I'm going to be asking. What was your breaking point of reaching a place of pain and vulnerability? What was the journey of recognizing that and the emotions around that? And thirdly, how did you overcome? How did you overcome? And you can be as open as you want to be, but ultimately this is just about sharing from that heartfelt place your those experiences. So Kwame from Jamaica, he's on Jamaican time,
Yeah, Kwame, it's tomorrow. You're early.
Yeah.
Right, maybe it's the Wi-Fi connection. Anyway, what we're going to do, I'm going to start, and I'm going to start with you, EJ.
Mm.
Yes, this is a gentleman I've known for a while, another Sagittarian. Woo, woo, woo. And I know EJ, you know, each and every one of you, I know that you've had some particular challenges in your life. So EJ, let's start with you in terms of one of those experiences that brought you to your knees. What was that feeling like? And then how did you actually recognize you were on your knees, and what was the process of you rising? Ladies and gents, EJ.
So I guess my earliest memory, and it wasn't, I was what, 14 years old, so I wasn't aware I was on my knees. The setup of my family was the fact there was mom, dad, and I had two brothers, and it was the ultimate isolation, because my parents had come from Nigeria to the UK, and though they had daughters over there, they had their sons here in the UK. But what I didn't have were my grandparents on both sides. I didn't have any of my uncles. I didn't have any of my aunties. So I had no relatives. This was wonderful. This was the perfect storm for my father, because he was an extremely violent man. Okay. And his violence, you see, I understand in our community, we can, you know, make jokes and laugh about when our parents beat us, right? And yeah, and in some cases, it's things that you could just remember fondly. But what people have to also remember, that there are violent people whose mission, whereby you think it's about discipline, but it's probably about their own inability to manage their own emotions. So therefore, him being the head of the house meant that you do what I say or I will break you. Now, as a child, and I was the youngest, it made it worse for me, because I very much knew where I was in the pecking order. And this came from how food was shared out. So father's plate is here, mother's plate, then the oldest son, second oldest son, and then me. And what was on the plate were diminishing until it got to my plate. But see, for me, I was very boisterous. And this is the thing about children. Study your children, because they're going to teach you something about you and themselves, especially if you want to understand your child. You've got to watch them, because they're going to bring some magic into your home. However, my father had other ideas about what he wanted his children to be. My dad wanted to be a politician. I remember he made a statement years later. He made a statement which, when I asked him, because I asked him this question, why did you want to have children? Because I was baffled, because you're always beating us. So I was curious. So he said, I didn't want children. I had children out of the love I had for your mother. So in other words, I got her pregnant and you arrived.
Wow.
And so our arrival meant that he had more pressure, and he wasn't going to be a politician. He wasn't going to be the president of Nigeria. So who was going to do that? His children. So he beat the life out of the first son and he ran away. Now, the rock bottom that you're speaking of, I was 14 years old, and up until and that will be about the third year in secondary school. So for 3 years, I always came home on my own for lunch. And one day I had a fight. Someone said something about my mom. I got upset. We had a bit of a tussle. I was kept back for about 10 minutes. And then I left I was let go from school so that I can go home and have lunch. And on my way out of the school, I saw a car and I thought, this car looks like my dad's car. I wasn't sure, but I said, because he loved the Peugeot 504. What happened was, as I approached the car, I noticed my mum was in the passenger seat, he was in the driver's seat, and my other brother was in the back seat. The door flies open, and he comes up with me with his both hands stretched out, and he was shouting at me as I approached, "Why were you late?" And in the middle of me explaining, his right hand came right across my face and almost knocked me off my feet. So he dragged me into the car and he carried on beating me up in the back seat. So my mother was saying to him, Pat, stop. People are watching. So he asked me, why are you late? And I said, I was in a fight. So and he said, he then got out the car. Now, the biggest secret I ever had in school was that I didn't tell anybody because I was the only one of a Nigerian parentage in my class. Everybody else were Caribbean kids. So there's about 30 of us, right? Yeah. And I got teased every day for 3 years being African, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was what it was in the 80s and 90s. Or in fact, 70s and 80s. So what happened was, it was my biggest secret. No one knew that I was being beaten up at home. And for the most innocuous and ridiculous reasons. I was terrified. Or when people used to come into school and they've gone to a football match, or they went to the cinema with their parents, or they went to the restaurant with their parents, my life was, we had to be home within 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So we were locked and bolted in the house, and that was it. We weren't allowed out onto the following day. We weren't allowed to have friends. We weren't allowed to use the phone. We weren't allowed anything. Right? So we would hide in our room. We were always shaking and we were always terrified. Anyway, so I get dragged into school.
When you were in your room, what were you allowed to, were you monitored even when you were in your room as well?
So sometimes what he would do, burst into my room just to see what I'm up to.
Oh, wow.
Right? And then what he used to do was, he was standing there and he goes, empty your wardrobe. I said, what? It says, empty your wardrobe. So I'd have to take all my clothes out from the bottom to the top and pile it in the middle of the floor. I don't know what he was looking for. Then he said, lift up your mattress, then lift up the bed. Then when he's satisfied, he would leave and I'd put everything back. All right. So he's now got me and he drags me back into the school. Now, as I told you that there was only 30 people in my class, yes. But in the dining hall, there was nearly 200, 300 kids. So he walks into the dining hall, sees my tutor, and says to her, why did you keep my child behind? So loud. The whole room just stopped dead. Everybody looked at this man shouting at a teacher, and then they all, as if all their heads belonged to one body, turned and saw me at the door. And they went, oh, it's his dad. So she said, I kept him back because he was fighting. He went, okay, don't worry, I will deal with him. And as he walked out, he backhanded me again in front of everybody.
Wow.
Right? Dragged me down the corridor, beat me down the corridor, put me in the car, drove home. So what was it? We got home. It turned out he was locked out and he needed me to go into next door, go through their garden. They were going to push me up to the second floor from the top of the shed, climbing through the top of the window to let him inside the house, which I did. Got in, let him in the house. He came in, walked past me, opened his letters and started reading. Now, for me, I'm like, my world is over. Everybody knows. How the hell am I going to go back to school?
Face them, yes. And
face them. So I remember telling an aunt, I was saying there was a lady there, a friend of my mum, and I was saying, oh, to run away. She said, oh, don't run away, don't run away. You know, I'll buy you roller skates, blah, blah, blah. I had to go back to school. I went back into school and everybody, once I walked into the classroom, the whole classroom fell about laughing. And I stood there and my tutor was standing there and they could see that there was marks across my face where his fingers had smashed the side of my face. So it'd all come up in whelps. And I just stood there. I couldn't say anything. So they came. Kids were coming up to me and slapping me in the face because they knew I couldn't do anything.
Giving permission to, yes.
Yeah, because I couldn't, they knew I couldn't do anything because your dad's going to beat you. So the whole of that afternoon, I didn't say a word. My tutor didn't approach me. She didn't speak to me. She didn't ask me if I was okay. And people just carried on teasing and laughing. Now, this, when you talk about rock bottom, I have never had this much clarity in my life. And the clarity was, I am now going to kill myself. It was so clear. It was so logical. It was so releasing. I was like, that's it. That's the answer. Because
that was the breaking point.
That was the breaking point, because since the age of 3 to the age of 14, I've been beaten. And the only way this is going to stop is if I opt out. It was so transcendental. And for the first time in my life, I felt free.
Wow.
And it's interesting because this is when people say they're going to commit suicide. No one tells you they're going to commit. They'll just do it. And anyone who does it has come to that point. It's like a flat line. You got heartbeat. Do, 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 do. I was in. It was now time. And I was okay. So I went. Now, this was the first time I had a clairaudient experience.
Okay.
And I didn't even know that it was a clairaudient experience. I wasn't even freaked out by it because I got a bottle of pills. I sat in my bed and I blocked my door. And I started to pour the pills into my hand. And I'm ready to now swallow all these pills. Then a voice said, stop. And I just went, why? And the voice said, it's not your time. I said, I can't take it anymore. They said, I know, but it's not your time.
And how old were you again,
14.
EJ?
14.
Okay.
It's not your time. So I said, but what about my dad? And the voice said, give him hell. And it was like I was given that permission. So I poured the tablets back into the bottle. And it was really funny because I ran away from home when I was 18. And when he spoke to me when I was 19, he said to me, from the age of 14, you gave me nothing but hell. And you asked me, at what age could I leave home? And I told you 18. And when 18 came, you ran. And I never remembered that conversation until he said it to me.
And were you still being beaten at this moment between the age of 14 and 18?
Yes.
Okay.
What stopped him beating me by the time I got to 17 was that he had a friend who equally beat his first son. I'm not his first son, but this particular man was beating his first son just like my father was doing, right? On this occasion, the first son threw a punch, knocked over his father. His father fell over and hit his head on a fireplace and died.
Okay. Oh.
So my father was telling me this story as a cautionary tale. Right? That the son is going to go mad because he killed his dad. So I said something along the lines of, well, if his father, and I was like, if his father didn't hit him, he would still be alive. I don't blame his son. And I looked at my father straight in the eye when I said it. From that day, my dad never raised his hand to me because he felt my son is going to kill me.
Wow. And how did that whole experience with your father affect your life or influence your life or impact your life afterwards? And in what way, EJ?
So I know there are people who said, oh, well, I never had a handbook. You know, a father-son relationship is extremely important because that's where you learn. If your father is around, right? If your or a father figure is around, that's how you learn to be a man. That's how you learn to understand who you are as a man, so that when you're in front of a woman, if a woman is who you're into, you know how to present yourself. You know who you are about, where you're from. You have strong foundations so that when a woman who's looking at you has the idea of, well, you know, men represent security, right? You fit that. I was clumsy. I knew nothing. You remember I told you in the last one, it was sitting in a car, strapped in, no brakes, no steering wheel, and it was pushed over a hill. And wherever I crashed, I got my learnings. Wherever I crashed, I got my learnings. I felt unprotected. I felt unsupported. I felt isolated. I felt alone. I felt like a clown. I felt like a fool. Because there were women who were, how can I say, more grounded, but less patient.
Mm.
And in this dichotomy of, you know, male versus female, which I don't actually believe Black people have time for. We really don't have time for this. You know, we need to actually find a way to communicate better. It's easy to put yourself in a position where you start saying, well, yeah, and he did this, and he was like that, and he didn't think about this. And suddenly I'm being torn to pieces because I've got this open heart where I just want to love. I just want to love you. I just want to give you all these feelings. But I had no sense. I had no structure. And I was easy to read. I was easy to manipulate. I was easy to be taught. I was picked to pieces. That pain of your first heartbreak, right? And it seemed like all my heartbreaks were first heartbreaks, but they got deep. I did get smart. And funny enough, I became smart because there were women who gave me that time to help me learn about where I'm from, who I am. Yes,
they so were. And it's interesting because, you know, we're going to be breaking all these types of conversations down even more, because out of what you've just shared, and thank you for sharing, EJ.
You're welcome.
Because I can see a bit of the emotion there, and that's good, and that's real, and that's raw, and you know, you're just putting yourself on the line. And the next conversation that we need to have around this then is those feelings of rawness, those feelings of being exposed in front of others now, but others in a different sort of capacity. So it's not the school room anymore, it's not the teacher anymore, it's the world, it's your relationships, that exposure. And you said something key there, because I'm going to move on to my next guest in a minute, but you said something key there in terms of a father should be, but you have to also understand, if your father has been wounded, it's that cycle. How can we break the cycle of going into life with a toolkit now? Because your father, obviously, whether he had a toolkit or not, he didn't use it the way you would have liked him to use it so that you could be. And you talked about, you know, getting in that car without the brakes. That's sometimes that's where life takes us, and that's how we learn. I want to make something very, very clear, is that I'm not sitting here blaming my father. Oh yeah, no, right? You're not. In fact, I think that my father's existence in my life was designed for me to be the best version of myself, for me to see something that I never wanted to be. Absolutely. So I love him for that. It was inadvertent. It may not have been his desire because he had other ideas, but I extrapolated from that the things that I chose to learn. And what helped me do that was when I became very politically aware. I had no politics, but when I became politically aware and became more Pan-Africanist in my thought processes, I began to realize there is a bigger tapestry and a role that I needed to play, which was a deep role of forgiveness, understanding, of love, of recognizing, and of not longer continuing, but learning to heal. So if I didn't have that pain, how would I learn to help heal others? There we go. And that's why you do what you do now. So we're gonna take up that conversation. We're gonna take up from where you left off. That's been very deep, that's been very succinct, that's been very, very intricate. And that's the next one. That's where we need to take off. Okay. You know, where you are now, the type of work that you do now. And they usually say we do things that continue to heal us. So EJ, I'd like to say thank you so much for sharing. You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And you know, this is going to be an incredible. I hope it helps others. Because it helps others. So thank you. And I have to pretend that we're going to go over to an advert. I haven't got anything lined up. I'll buy it. Gerald sing something for us.
There's no me without you.
That's right.
And you guys can be the background singers, right?
Yes.
Okay, so ladies and gents, just to remind you that today, this is one of the another segment of On the Sofa with Esther. There's so many different segments. On a Sunday, I interview legends of pioneers, and very soon I'm going to be doing an indie artist show. Yesterday, I did an incredible conversation with a lady by the name of Cindy Jarrett, and it was conscious dating in an unconscious world. And she's got a workbook. She's very deep in what she's doing about, especially about relationships. She's able to pull them apart and to teach in a way that's really going to help all of us to evolve. So that's also out on my platform. But for the purpose of today, this group is about men supporting men, and these gentlemen today are going to be sharing some of their most deepest, sometimes maybe darkest moments, but it's how they went through it and how they came out of it. Anthony, what are you doing? You're hiding.
Yeah, can you see that? that was part of the advert. That was part of the advert, man.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Come on, that was part of the advert, you know.
Anthony joking as well.
No. Yeah, I tell you what, that was, you know, men does things, you know. We're multitasking, so we're on video.
Whatever.
This is men supporting men.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm going to go over to Gerald next to share, you know, the three sort of predominant questions would be, you know, your breaking point, the pain that you felt and went through, and what was your point of overcoming or healing?
Well, you know,
Well, Gerald.
I listened to his experience, his strength and his hope. And from a spiritual aspect, my father was a Baptist pastor, and being a PK, you know, sometimes you got into things. But as I spoke the last time we were on, my biggest problem was addiction. And I realized that addiction is not anything that you choose to have. In my case, I didn't choose to be addicted to anything, alcohol, drugs, women, whatever. But I had that addictive personality. And on my father's side of the family was addiction. But it was like alcohol. And when I started singing, I had drank alcohol, but then I was introduced to cocaine. And that went on for years. And there were times when I would get to a point where I knew that I had an addiction, but, and I would say, I'm gonna stop. And this little voice inside of me said, no, just try it one more time, you'll be okay. And then there go I, and I tried again. And then, so once I was talking to my father, and I just opened up to him like I'm opening up to you all. And he told me, he said, son, he said, you know how you eat dinner or have breakfast or lunch, you always say a grace. He said, treat your addiction the same way. He said, think about just have, before you go into that part of coke or smoking it or whatever, you pray and ask God's forgiveness. Ask God for strength to get you through it. And I did that for years. And then one time I did it and I was coming home. I'd been out for a couple of days and I was coming home. And I'll never forget, I went to this park and I parked my car. And I got out and walked to the edge of, or you can see the river where I was standing. And I raised my hand and said, God, I'm an addict and I can't stop. Whatever it takes, please come into my life and remove it. I went back to my car, sat down, and I smoked the pipe one more time. And I looked down the far end of the parking lot, and the state trooper had stopped somebody up there.
Oh, wow.
So he was making a move out of the park because they'd been there too long. So he was coming out and he saw my car and he pulled up beside me and he asked me, was I all right? I said, I'm fine. And he started off, then he backed up. He said, are you okay? And I said, officer, no, I'm not okay.
Wow.
And he asked me, was I high? I said, yes. He said, do you have anything on you? I said, yes. He said, you know that, and he never, what the good part, he's never raised his voice. And he told me, he said, I'm gonna have to arrest you. And so I started crying and I told him who I was and what I did for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, believe me, you'll be fine. So he took me down to the substation. He never handcuffed me, none of that. In fact, while he was going through the procedure, another car pulled up and asked for directions. And he stopped, he said, hold, wait 1 minute. He stopped talking to me, gave them directions and came back. And when a cop is doing an arrest, they don't stop for nothing.
That's right, yes.
The arrest. But I didn't notice that till afterwards. So when I got to the substation, he said, okay, Gerald, you go use the phone. And the desk sergeant said, you gonna let him walk? Because the door was right across from the phone, out leading outside. He said, Gerald, you going anywhere? I said, nope. I realized then that that was my time to reach out to get the help that I needed. And so he put me in a cell, and I as my cell, I could look over the Hudson River. Raised my hand, and I thank God. I said, thank you for saving my life. And
so to be clear, Gerald, were you thinking of jumping at that time?
No. I was in a cell. I wasn't thinking of jumping at all.
Before you got out, before you got to the cell, when you went to the river.
Right. I wasn't thinking of jumping. I just wanted to stop.
Okay.
And I remembered the prayers that my father told me to always say, just be thankful, be grateful. And so later on that night, a very dear friend of mine came and got me, took me home. And my wife and my father and Jesus Christ, God, they saved my life. And my wife said, you're gonna stay with your father for a few days. So I stayed over at my father's house. And believe it or not, he didn't beat up on me. He didn't talk, he didn't, chastise me in no kind of way. But he did let me know, I guess you have enough now.
Yes.
He prayed with me and we talked. I stayed with my father for 3 days. Then I went and I started talking to a counselor.
Okay.
And I remember going to the counselor, he helped entertainers. And every time I would go to his office to have, to meet with him, he would have me in one room and all the other addicted people in another room. And so I asked him, I said, why do you have me sitting over here and they're over there? He said, you're an entertainer and I don't want them to see you this way.
Okay, wow. You were protected.
Yeah. But then I said, my thought, but I'm one of them. Why should I hide over here? So I voluntarily got up, and each time I would meet him, I would go in the room with the other brothers and sisters and we would talk. And that helped me begin my healing because I realized that I was no different and that my addiction was not my fault. That was something from the time that I learned, it was something that like you inherited, not inherited, but it was passed down. If your father, mother was an alcoholic, you could have the same symptoms. And that's what happened. And finally, I realized that I'm the only one that could help myself. But I had to first admit who I am, who I was. And then I started admitting who I was. And that went on for a couple of years. I was straight. And one day, again, I said, well, oh, the hell with it. And I tried it again. But this time, nothing happened. When I did that drug, I didn't get high. I didn't feel nothing. I got my wife on the phone and I said, baby, I messed up. And she said, come on home.
Mhm.
She ran me a nice tub of water and I got in, took a bath. And she called my sponsor. He picked me up and took me to about 4 or 5 meetings. And by the time I finished those meetings, the light was on to my mind to know that God had took care of me. He watched over me because that drug didn't affect me no more. And I thank God I never put a needle in my arm.
Oh, wow.
So like that. But I realized from then on that God had a purpose for me. My voice, I didn't lose my voice.
Mm.
My Creole wasn't damaged. And then I had an opportunity on national television in Africa to tell this same story.
Wow.
And I realized that was my bottom. That was my bottom. And my wife and my father stood by me day and my mother lived in North Carolina at the time, but my wife and my father stood by me. They would not give up on me. And when I realized that, I couldn't give up on myself. I had something to live for.
There we go.
There
we go.
And I realized that was my bottom. And I thank God each and every day because when I read my scripture now, the recent scriptures that I've been reading is that God is with you even in your darkest hour.
Yeah.
And you have to keep faith and believe. Even though it may not be easy, he'll bring you through it. And it's always a lesson in everything that he does for you. The pain and hurt that I went through that afternoon on Alpine Overlook was the best thing that happened to me. And I'll tell the world, I would never go through that again, but I have no regrets because God taught me a lesson and I took heed to his lesson. And that's why I have I don't feel bad. I don't feel embarrassed about sharing it because if just one person listening to my story and they're doing the same thing that I did and they stop, then God, that's a blessing. That's a blessing. If I can share my problem, my life, and the things that I went through with that, and it brings somebody to reality.
Yes.
And it's a great thing. And I'm not ashamed of it. I would be ashamed if I was still doing it.
Yes.
But I thank my God today, I am over 30 years clean and free. And
I need to do a high five to you as well. I did one to you, EJ, so I've got to keep things.
And I know there are people all over the world watching this, and they probably say, oh my God, I didn't know, but we all have something, skeletons in our closets.
Absolutely.
But this skeleton in my closet was not meant for me to keep to myself. And what I want to say to all the young people, whether you're entertainers or whether you're in a blue collar situation, no matter what you're doing, look at what God did for me. I could have been dead, but he saw fit for me to live. And he brought me to where I am today, where I'm well known around the world. We've had hit records, all of that could have been gone, but that was my blessing. So I have to pay my blessing forward. So if I can help somebody else go forward, that is what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to keep it a secret,
Don't worry, we're going to be having you back on. There's parts 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
We're going to be having you back on. And I believe you are blessing people through your music because your music is very much about love. Remember when I met you, I think it was about 3 years ago, I came to your house and I interviewed you. We were joking because you had just put out this sexy, sexy song. And I said, Gerald, are you still doing that? And you said, young lady, of course. But you're and the thing is also you are an inspiration to so many. I mean, these gentlemen here, how people respond to you because surely something from that experience has been imbued in you, not just in terms of you being an artist, but you as a person. And just like EJ, in terms of what he does, you know, each of our experiences, like you said, even if it's just one person, but because we became the change, you became the change, it allows somebody else to have that hope to become the change in their world and their life. So thank you so much for sharing that, Gerald.
Two things that I'd like to say before you move on is, first of all, anybody who's thinking of doing that, and I'm going to say this just like I said it in my national interview, you don't have to do it because I did enough for you. You know, I've been down and God has brought me up, you know, and I think that's the most important thing that I could say, is that I've been there, I'm sharing it with you. Take my word, you don't have to go there. I was blessed. God gave me an opportunity to move forward in my life, to be married for 40 years.
Wow, as old as I am, Gerald. Wow.
Yeah,
You know,
slightly older, several years, decades older than me. You know,
but it's a blessing, and you know, I'm just thankful to God that I'm able to give back for what has happened to me. And sometimes I just want to say that you need to take experiences, whether they're good or bad. If you're spiritual, if you believe in God, whoever you believe in, you must, and I say believe in God, because if you realize the things that has happened to you that are not good, that are bad, also stop, get off the pity pot and look at yourself, say, now, how can I get better from it? What can I do to be better?
Yes.
You know, and you look at the things that you did, you don't want to go back there no more. And the other thing is that I learned to love me. I learned to love Gerald even more.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. See, that's for another, there's so much that's coming out of this. And ultimately, ladies and gents, this, you know, these monthly sessions are going to lead into an international conference very soon. I'll be able to share details in a few weeks' time about that. So thank you both. Now, a bit more, we're going to go over to an ad break. Gerald?
Actually, I was thinking about the break.
Start singing the song, Joe.
Actually, now that you're back, okay, since this is brothers supporting brothers, I have a couple of shirts.
Bring them over, man. Bring them over.
Let's see if I can get them through the internet.
You know what? It's all military habits. You know,
I love it. I honestly,
iron and stiff. That's to know what I'm talking about.
Listen, man. For me, that actually works, because it's like, you know, sometimes people doodle. They sort of like, they draw while they're thinking and they're drawing, right? So and talking, right? And so for you, we can iron and talk at the same time. I just think that's so organic. That is so natural. It didn't even look, for me, it didn't even look wrong. It was just like, yeah, that's what I would do. So next time I'm coming with my ironing board and a big fat iron. Oh, yeah. I'm going to hold my whole pile.
I'm one of those guys that iron too.
Yeah.
I love to iron. Nobody iron my shirts but me. If they don't go,
I can send. I'm gonna DHL my stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't.
You're gonna open your door and all these clothes is just gonna fall through. What?
Okay. Well, ladies and gents, Kwame trying to get back in. Kwame all the way from Jamaica, an hour later, but never mind, he's arrived. We used to have an airline in Barbados, BWI, Better Market Airlines. So I think Kwame's on that.
My God.
Right. So, ladies and gents, just to remind you that on the Sofa with Esther, this section is Men Supporting Men. Part 1, his story, where each of these gentlemen are doing a deep dive about their life. And then at the end of February, we're going to have Kwame, Courtney, and Rough Ends sharing their deep dive moments. And thank you for the gentlemen who shared already. Now, Anthony Lyken. Herman, you got to change that. Just next time, put Anthony back. Herman sounds so old school.
Wow.
like I said, I've known this gentleman for quite a while, and yeah, he's definitely got a deep dive as well. So over to you and the three sort of specifics around that. You know, your breaking point moment, you know, the feelings around that. How did you have your aha moment that you needed to do something, and how did you overcome? So over to you, Anthony.
Thank all the gentlemen for their story. There's so many breaking points in a man's life, but I'm going to start with this one. It's going to be a little bit graphic as to what happened to me. And now that my first brother who spoke, he sort of made me reflect back on that particular breaking point. His childhood at 14, I ran away at 9, right? Now, I was born in Guyana. My mom, yes, grandparents, Barbados, Guyanese, St. Lucian. And my mom was a daughter of a very proud man. Out of all his children, my mom was the one who was flying high, looking at universities and, you know, going places. And she somehow, you know, my dad was a party promoter. He was in the military, and she found herself into his web one night, and I was born. My grandfather, when my mom was pregnant, he ill-treated my mom, he starved my mom. My mom went through a lot. But one of the things that I remember seeing is that my mom would read novels. She would read 2-3 novels within a week or so. She would just read. That was her pastime of the abuse that she was going through. My grandfather was a very cruel man because he passed down to his sons what has happened to him. So the beating and all that kind of stuff, that's why I can identify with my first brother who, you know, opened up about the beatings. So when I was fast forward, I was born in 1963. My mom left Guyana in the 70s, the early 70s, to pursue a life in the United States of America. And obviously, with my proud grandfather and grandmother, they were like, well, you can't take the child with you because no one will want you because you already have a child. So back in those days, when you have a child, you were literally stained. You know, is you put the child up for adoption or you leave them with families. So she would leave me with them, like, you know, like it was like a pawn shop. And she would go to abroad and she would work and make the money and send it for them to look after me. But they were beating the hell out of me. And my mom came back in 1972, and an incident took place in the house. Before my mom left, I was very, very close to her. We slept in the same room because, in the Caribbean, you have these big houses, and parents, sometimes their children sleep sometimes in the same room. I want to make this real quick. And while my mom and I had developed that very close relationship, I remember the sweet things she used to do for me because I'm our only child, our only son. And, you know, when we go out, you know, if she wear a red shirt, she'll buy me a red shirt and a black trousers. So me and my mom was very close until she left for the state. But when she came back to Guyana to visit families, it was like the queen landed in Guyana and she brought all these suitcases and all these things for everybody. And for some reason, they were beating me so badly that every time I turned, it was beatings and beatings and beatings. And they would write her and tell her, I am no good. The things she sends for me, I'm destroying them. So when she came back to Guyana, she came with this violent hatred. And all the family members, I remember this day, that was around her, and everybody was around her, and I was getting no attention. And I went into the room, and I took a match, and I lit that match. And when I saw the fire was coming, I took my sneakers, my trainers, or my sneakers, what we would call in the States, or where we call it trainers, and I hit the fire out. And she smelled, in those houses, those wooden houses, they can literally smell something burning. She rushed into the room and she asked me what I was doing. And I was like, nothing. And I was so scared. And she looked under the bed and she saw the matches and she saw my mother took me into the kitchen. She took one of those old steel knives She put it on the stove.
Oh.
And when that knife, that steel got hot, it doesn't look red, it looks black. Wrapped me around my waist with every family member standing around.
Wow.
And she put those knives on my hands and burned both of my hands. I was screaming. It's like I can hear that child screaming today. I was screaming and screaming, and because it was so, I mean, you get burned with an iron, you're like, oh my God, you know what I mean? This was a knife that was on the stove, and she makes sure that every part of my hands, that knife was pressed against. And then she released me, and I ran to the bedroom, and I curled up and I was crying. Now, on top of all the beatings that I was getting from everybody else, my uncles, my grandmother, my grandfather, she came, and this is what she did to me.
So did she ever ask you, Anthony, did she ever ask you or question you about your life or what was going on with you? Did she ever have that conversation with you?
She did not want to hear what I have to say. As far as she's concerned, what they were saying was right, and whatever I say was wrong.
Yeah.
Wow.
So one little boy against a whole bunch of family members. The next morning I woke up and the bladders, my hands were swollen with bladders. And you know, when you get burned and you hit that burn, the water comes out and put me into the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I screamed when I was in the bathroom. I screamed because it was burning so bad. And then she went out that day and she bought some ointment and she bring it and she rubbed it on my hands. And then she left for the United States, and the beating continued. And I would have nightmares of those burns. I would have nightmares, but then I became very violent because now that she has done that, it is my time to get back at anything and anyone that crossed my path. So I will go to school. I will fight everybody in school. I will fight teachers. I will do the most craziest things because it's like my rage was so bad. And then she came back. She came back in 1976. And again, did not want to hear nothing I had to say.
Wow.
So when I look back now, that was a breaking point that sort of transcended my life when I got through. And it was around the time, the late 70s, I started to listen to the Teddy Pendergrass, Marvin Gaye, the Manhattans. Those were the songs that kept me, I would get into the mirror and I would put the false hair in my face and they put the wig on and I would sing. And they would tell me, you cannot sing. There is nothing, you will never be nobody. And they put down and I mean, they walked on top of me. And I never met my dad until I was 14 years old. I ran away from home at 9. So between 9 and 14, I was on the streets.
Sorry, Anthony, you've frozen? Anthony?
Yeah.
You've frozen.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Am I back on now?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, there's a bit of a lapse, but you're back.
Am I back on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me move from this position that I'm in. And it led me to with this sort of violence streak that I was very defensive. I didn't trust anybody. It's like when you wound an animal, anything comes close to you, you never believe that they have the best interest at heart. So then what made it a bit worse with my violence streak is not that I went out hurting people, but if you cross my path, you can get hurt badly. It was like a Scorpio waiting there to bite you if you come across my path. Then when I met my dad at 14 and my dad forged my age and got me into the military, that sort of gave me a comradeship and a sense of structure in terms of, I think that was God, as Gerald said, when that police officer saw him in the park, that was God answering your prayer. And even though my dad was not a deadbeat dad and he was not in my life, I think he came in at a time that if he did not come in at that particular time, around 14, I would have just lashed out. I would have totally destroyed.
And did your dad,
I would
did you
have
ever,
totally been.
did you share with your dad what you had experienced, Anthony?
You know, I only shared that with him years after we met. I shared with him years after we met. I mean, it was years after we met. I shared that with him, and he couldn't believe it. He could not believe that I went through that. And
Did you share it with your mother? Did you eventually get to tell her what happened?
Listen, I am 59 years of age today, and my mom has still not listened to me. She lives on Tremont. She lives on Tremont Avenue, 2220 Tremont Avenue in the Bronx. I went and I found my mom and tried to reach out to her, try to express to her, but she would not listen. She would not. I don't even think she can remember what she had done to me and the mark that she left. And that mark that she left, I did not trust women. I did not trust anybody. And what happened to me in life was that I went into good relationships, but I never stayed in those relationships. I had to run from them because the minute I feel a sense of distrust, I ran. Every time I feel a sense of distrust, I always on my defense. And I mean, God has answered my prayer, because if it wasn't for God, the grace of God and his mercy, I would have been doing time or 6 feet under. Because when I came to myself, which is, I guess, is my part 2, and, you know, understand my manhood, understand who I am as a person, and I look back, I sat on the great teaching of Dr. Ed Cole in the United States, Christian Men's Network, and is with that, I became to learn so much about myself, and I look at other guys who are sitting in the penitentiary and running guns in the street in Chicago and in Brooklyn, and I look at their lives and said, that could have been me.
Yeah.
That could have been me.
Yeah.
But it's grace, because I used to go to Sunday school as a little boy. I was the only child in Sunday school who will get up and sing. I was the only one who will get up and act. I was the only one who would want to play a guitar. Everybody was shy. Everybody was, you know, they were, and I wanted that. But, you know, I didn't get it. And now my son, you know, I had him in the States the other day. He's back here now. He's into the music now. And I said, I think you're an extension of me, you know, and I'm supporting him all the way, because I was told that I would never, ever, ever, even when my mom wanted to bring me up to the United States, they discouraged her. They told her, no, don't take him. He's going to embarrass you. He's going to, it's like my mom's, I was like a poison ivy in my mom's eye. I mean, on to this day, no one can understand. You have a son, he's not in jail, he's not on drugs, he's not doing any bad things on the streets, he's ambitious, but you still has not reached out to your son. And that was painful. Yeah. That was painful. I cried many nights. I remember crying, wishing that my mom was here, wishing that I could just go and just rest my head in her lap and hear her words of wisdom. But I had to grow up a loner. I had to be a one-man army. I had to fight for me till this day. I had to fight for me. And that's why I started the Academy for Young Boys. That's why I mentor young males. It's because I understand that loneliness. I understand those suicidal thoughts. I understand the drugs, and I never did it. I'd only drink a bit of alcohol, but my pastime was from women to women to women. And I realized that I wasn't being respectful of women. Not that I was hurting them, because I would go give them the love and I'm gone. Because I said, you will leave me just like my mom leave me. Wow. So why should I?
Exactly. Yeah.
And one thing, because this is brilliant. I mean, everything that all of you have shared is very powerful. But Anthony, I want to ask you, so at this moment in time, how have you, I'm going to find the right word, is it resolved, or this thing that you wish to have with your mother, how have you managed that or resolved it all?
It is not resolved, but you have to understand that sometimes you have to forgive people in proxy.
Yes.
Because some people will, especially the older Caribbean and African parents, they will carry things to their grave. they would not say they're sorry.
No.
And they have not done anything wrong. So you have to forgive them in proxy. You have to release them through grace.
Yeah.
It's only grace you can release them. And I tell you what, it's not that it doesn't affect me today. It does, but it doesn't affect me the way it used to affect me. Because every time it comes, I allow grace and mercy to see me through. Because you see, grace is God unmerited favor.
Brilliant.
And the very fact I am the owner of, my own business. I'm working, I'm ambitious. I'm not, but you see me all the time. I'm not dragged down in the streets. I did not allow the darkness, the pain of yesterday to dictate what my today is going to be. But it do hurts. And I think it's forum like these, when you come together with men, naked and not ashamed, you can express yourself, and you got another brother putting his arms around you in proxy and saying, I've been there. I understand your pain. We're walking together as
to say, I love
soldiers.
you. Do you even use those words? I love you. Do you know what I mean? As men to men, in terms of that kind of connection, to be connected like a brother.
Gerald, that's your next song, Gerald, please. Okay, get right.
Connected like brothers.
Yeah. It's when I listen to when I speak about what I've went through and all that I've been through, God is so good because he lets me see that somebody else has gone through something a little bit worse than you, and you made it through. But the most important part about both of you, Anthony and EJ, is that God's grace and mercy. And you guys are doing it by paying it forward. You're paying it forward to your son by teaching your son what not to do and how not to be, even though you still hurt, but grace is just coming through for you, and it's the same thing with all of us. It's only through God's grace and mercy that we're here to tell our story, and for us not to be, and not beating up on your parents, but the lesson that you did get out of it was that how to live and how not to treat your children, and how to treat other people in your life, how to say, I love you, how to say, I forgive you, and most of all, how to be a man to say, I made a mistake and I accept it.
Yeah. That's
we're not allowed to. We can make mistakes. And that's okay, because I'm a big believer in responsibility and accountability, because there's a paradigm I work with, and because funny enough, the work I do right now is that I'm a recovery worker for dual diagnosis for drug and alcohol misuse and complex needs. And so one of the things, I had a client today, and he was talking about, he was calling himself names. He was basically saying, I'm an idiot, blah, blah, blah. So I said to him, look, there's two ways you can look at this. If you have problems, it's because life, as far as you're concerned, is happening to you. If you decide that life is happening for you, then your problems become challenges, and any challenge you have becomes an upgrade. So rather than it becoming a problem, they are your teachers. It will teach you what to do next, who you're going to be. You have to give yourself permission to be 10 out of 10. Yes. Someone, and somewhere along the line, you believed the stories that you were less than the situations you were greater than. And I'm saying to you, okay, that's okay. Now you have the opportunity to say, I'm an A+ student. I'm going to give myself that. But the secret here is to maintain it, not necessarily to have to earn it, because we always kind of strive to get there. Oh, I failed. Forget about that. It's not even that. It's life is happening for you, and therefore it's your teachers. And once you understand that difference, then anything that you've experienced in your life, you will realize that having problems keep you stuck. Seeing something as a problem keeps you stuck. Because you start bringing in words like like I'll try. Well, if you try, you lie. Because at the end of the day, if I say pick up a pen, you pick up a pen. I didn't say try to pick up a pen. So you either do it or you don't. When life is happening for you, you just do it. And that's kind of.
You see, the one thing I learned, one of the things I learned, our heart
We've
is
got
like
about a few minutes left, guys. There's about 4 minutes left. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our heart is like a soil. And a lot of times people, when we're in this journey, people will sow things into that soil. But if that soil is not fertile enough, nothing is going to grow from it. We have to be at that place where the soil is fertile enough so that when we receive that word will germinate and it will grow into an experience.
Yes. And remember, if they try to bury you, you're just a seed, you're going to grow.
Exactly. The death of a seed is, the death of a seed is the burial of a forest.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to tell you both, I really felt your stories. I'm empathic. I really felt your stories. I felt quite emotional listening to both your stories. And Anthony, the burning of the hands. Oh my God, that's just, my heart broke.
Yeah.
Just hearing that,
And you wanted to share something, EJ. I just wanted to remind you, from our last session, you said, and this is with EJ's just sharing from that place. The first session that we did last month, EJ actually shared that he wanted to cry. And I'm like, why did you want to cry? So if you could just explain that. We've literally got about 3 minutes left.
Yes.
So just share that, because this is the platform of being vulnerable and authentic. Yes. So
I was listening to everybody last time we were all together, and I wanted to cry, and it was crying from a soul space. It was my soul wanted to cry, because it was almost like for the first time in this vibration, I didn't feel alone. When I was going through what I've been going through, whatever it is, I felt that it was just me in that isolation. But hearing everybody else's story, it's like, hang on, Black people, you mean we're all going through this? We're all experiencing this. And the only thing if only we knew each other, to just have put our hands on each other's shoulders and say, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. So when I was listening to everybody's story, I just felt really emotional. And so I felt like almost, I'm going to cry, because it was as if I had been holding my breath for years.
Wow. And
then I can exhale, because I can sit down and say, this is what happened to me. And no one in the room is saying, oh yeah, but you know what, I had that. Yeah. But you know what, it's just what it is. No one said that. Everybody took everybody's story as authentic as it was and appreciated what we were feeling. And for that, thank you. For that,
that was the absolute unmerited favor of God, because you go into a room with men and everybody will talk about the football, the boxing, the game, the basketball, but no one will undress themselves, because Adam, when God called him in the cool of the day, he said, I was naked. God said, who told you so? Who told you so? He covered himself with fig leaves because he know he mess up. And just like we mess up, we remove those fig leaves now, and we're naked and we're not ashamed. As the book of Proverbs says, men are like iron. They sharpen each other's countenance. So what happened here, what Esther has done, is helping us to sharpen each other, because we look at each other's countenance now, and we can see that broad smile. We can feel that sense of relief, and, everything, I think, is all about, this is not by accident. No. This is by God's design.
Yes.
Certainly by design, absolutely.
And it's and one thing that I like to say in closing, we recorded this song, and it's a big song in South Africa called Men Cry.
So cry, yes.
Yeah, I listen to that song, man. I listen to that song all the time, man. I listen to that.
It's okay for a man to cry. I understand what you're saying, EJ, emotionally what you felt, but men need to realize that we hurt and we can cry, and it doesn't make us less than a man.
No. Absolutely.
No. It makes you a man when you can cry.
Yes.
Well, EJ and Gerald, I want to say I love you guys.
I love you too,
I
man.
love you, man.
I am
I
so
love
happy
you.
I love you too, man.
And I want to say also, firstly, I'm going to let you get back to your ironing, Anthony.
I love you, Esther. I love you, Esther.
And EJ,
You know,
I'm just sitting there looking at that beard of yours. I just wondered, when you feel emotional, can you use it to wipe your tears?
Yes, yes, I can.
And I'm coming to you, Gerald, and you've got
And if I run out of a pen, I could take it and write it in my chin. Deal with my phone.
You know, I'd really like to, I just want to say thank you, because I've listened to all your stories you're sharing, and I'm just, you know, I just feel so empowered and inspired within myself listening to yourselves, because we're doing something magical, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. We're doing something huge here, and this is going to continue. You know, every month. Next month we've got 4 other men that's going to share, and then I've got a couple of special guests the month after. And like I said, later down in the year, I'll let you guys know I want to put on a conference, and this is something that I want to travel. Because we've started something, and it's something that's important now. And I've just been so inspired. So ladies and gents, I hope you've been inspired by these conversations. Now, if anybody wants to get hold of you, EJ, for the work you do, Coach Anthony, can you all just share how they can do that, please?
Oh yeah, if anybody wants to get hold of me, it's ejsoulguide@gmail.com.
Okay, ejsoulguide@gmail.com, and I'll put those details in the link. Anthony?
I'm Anthony Lyken @gmail.com.
Okay.
And I'm on Facebook. People can catch me up on Facebook, inbox me. I think what we need to do is to set up a Facebook page and a group page in where, and we need to set some rules down where we set that group up, and if anyone wants to join that group, they have to follow those rules. It's something Esther, you and I can discuss as to those rules, because obviously not only people's privacy, but we have to have a level of respect on there, because this is all about respect. And Esther, I just want to say that over the years I've known you, your sons never passed me anywhere. You know, they know when I used to run them down the road, so they never passed me anywhere. Those guys are grown men now, and I'm proud of them.
Yeah,
you know?
Thank you.
So,
my boys, my man.
The men.
And I'm going to be a grandmom again soon, so it's almost like, I'm
And I want to thank you for the opportunity to meeting Gerald and EJ. Gerald, like I said, you've blessed me with your music. I've listened to it. I'm ironing and I'm playing your music. You're a blessed man. Thank you. I thank God that, over the years, back in the early 70s, there's no me without you, mate.
And men don't cry. And on that note, we're just slightly over time, but just want to say thank you to you guys, and ladies and gents. There's going to be more coming at the end of February. Do stay tuned to the Esther Austin Global page, where I'm going to put up information about this. And we are going to set up a group. And as the group evolves, we hope you evolve with us. Thank you all for your time.
And Esther, I prefer the other glasses.
Oh, you now tell me. Now tell me where please. You're wrong. These are all sponsored by Run It First, by the way. So
right, okay.
There we go, showing off. Okay, so ladies and gents, have a fantastic week, and we'll be in touch. All right, thank you very much.
Bye for now. Take care, folks.
Bye.